Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give folks a minute to pop on. Welcome. Happy October.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Angela. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We don't have quorum yet, but hopefully we will soon, and we'll get some housekeeping out of the way. So I am calling the October 25th, 2023 HSAC meeting to order. It's 3:01. Normally at the top of our meetings, we read the goals that are listed at the top of the agenda. I'm going to do that. But if you would also, while I'm doing that, like to share in the chat, there's a little prompt I thought might be helpful to understand where we're coming from today. So share one of the things that motivates you or drives you in this work. So if you feel like sharing one of those things in the chat, they may be connected to a goal that I read, so we can have a sense of who's in the room and why are we here. So our goals are: finish the job of ending chronic homelessness, prevent and end veterans' homelessness, prevent and end homelessness for families, youth, and children, and set a path to ending all types of homelessness. If you've just joined us, we're also having a little opportunity to share in the chat, sharing one of the things that motivates or drives you in this work. As we just read the goals, sometimes hearing from people a little bit more specifically about what motivates you will help us kind of connect that to our goals, and get to know each other a little bit. Great. So as we keep moving forward and still waiting for quorum, a little bit of housekeeping. Please check the chat for the sign-in form, and please do that during the meeting. Also, reminders to stay muted unless you're coming off mute to speak. If you have a question, raise your virtual hand, or you can put your question in the chat, and our community development team will be monitoring that as well, and making sure we get those answered either in the chat or out loud. Do we have any public comment today?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Waiting to see if we will get quorum in the next minute. Thanks to those that are offering
One off.
in the chat. Sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry about that. We are one off at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So on our agenda, we forgot to place in minutes. So that is something that we'll skip for the moment and come back to as soon as we have quorum. So Jonathan, are you ready for the performance management quarterly report?
I sure am.
Okay, I'll pass it off to you then.
All right. Thanks, Eliza. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jonathan Crooms. I'm a veteran service officer with Durham County Veterans Services, and I'm the current chair of the Performance Management Subcommittee. And I do have a brief update for the larger committee about what we've been up to the past 3 months. You all probably may remember that we have been sending you all some results from 3 scoring competitions that we've had going on in the past couple months. The first one is the State Emergency Solutions Grant competition. And so we had a scoring panel of Tracy Stondino, Renee Vaughn, and myself who reviewed the applications and then made recommendations to the larger body here. And we do have a little bit of news to report on that. Housing for New Hope was recommended for all of the funding that we were able to apply for, and the state granted that. So congratulations to Housing for New Hope, and many thanks to the city staff and to the scoring panel for their good work on scoring those applications. The second competition that we have been involved in is the City of Durham Request for Proposals competition. And the scoring panel for that was also the same as the state ESG, Tracy Stondino, Renee Vaughn, and myself. And we made ranking recommendations, which have been sent to the city of Durham. And because the funding comes from the city of Durham, they now take over the process and make final decisions about grants. The final competition is the Continuum of Care competition. And a scoring panel of Daniel Butler, Renee Vaughn, and myself reviewed scores and made recommendations to the larger body, which approved them. And we're just waiting to hear what HUD's final decision is on how much they'll be granting. So that really has taken up the a lot of our time and energy the past 3 months. We do have some other things that have been going on as well to share with. We have both new members and some new leadership. Shantae Addison of Housing for New Hope is our new subcommittee secretary. So we are excited to have a secretary once again, and she has jumped right in to take notes for us. And then we've also had a number of new members join, Vega Swepson, Renee Vaughn, Angela Holmes, and Eliza Matthew, our chair, have joined as members. And then the last thing that we've really been working on is we're already starting to make preparations for scoring evaluations in 2024. Obviously, it is late October. We still have some time left in 2023, but 2024 is really not that far around the corner. So we've begun to look at revisions to our scorecard for the upcoming spring competition, and also to talk about how we'll do Housing First evaluations for the upcoming year. That's what we've been up to, and I thank the committee for all of their good work, and I also thank the city staff for their support. And if anyone has any questions, I'm delighted to try to answer them.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised or questions in the chat. Thanks for those that are continuing to share in the chat what motivates them. And thank you, Jonathan, for that report. While Jonathan was speaking, I got word that we have quorum. So we'll move back to our minutes for our September meeting. And that should have come in an email on Monday morning, the October 23rd, from the Durham Opening Doors that included the agenda for today and also the minutes from September. So I'll open the floor for a motion to approve the minutes of our September 2023 HSAC meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thanks. Angela made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Helen Tripp seconded the motion. All in favor indicate yes in the chat. Against indicate no, or abstain as needed. All right, the September minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving forward in our agenda, the next two items will be presented by Colin Davis. So I'm going to go ahead and pass off to him for both of those, which are transition of community development staff, as well as a presentation on fair market rent, area median income, and affordable housing connection. Both of these are informational only. Colin?
Good afternoon, all. I wanted to formally let everyone know, I think most of you know by now, that our wonderful Ruby Holmes, who started off in 2019 with the homeless team as our coordinator and was promoted to the analyst position a little over a year ago, has decided to leave the homeless team. The good news for us is she's not leaving the city. She's staying with the city and moving over to the compliance team to become an administrator on the compliance team, which is another promotion. And she will be working with the compliance team in community development on monitoring contracts. So since she's been such a critical part of our homeless team family, and many of you have known her and worked with her on a variety of tasks, and she's been a backbone to keeping these meetings going for years. We did want to share her passing over to another team in our department. While we are very sad to see her leave, we are very, very happy for her, and it's a well-deserved promotion for her, and she's going to do a fantastic job over there. So I don't know if she was able to make the call today, but I did invite her. So if anybody has anything you'd like to say or thoughts, we wanted to give the HSAC and whoever else is here a moment to share any appreciation that wanted to be shared to her, since she probably won't come to too many more of these meetings due to being overloaded in her new role instead of overloaded in her old role. So congrats, Ruby. See a lot of chat in the chat piece. If anybody has any direct comments they want to share, just raise your hand.
I'll just quickly share. Oh, Helen, go ahead. I'll go after you.
No, I had the opportunity to serve on the executive committee for 3 years, and Ruby was a mainstay to the majority of that time. And I really appreciated all the support that she gave me while I was working on that committee, knowing that that was just a small part of what she did every day. So thank you, Ruby, and all the best for your new role. Sorry, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I second that, Helen. And I also say I think that there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that we don't see to help us get set up in the way that we are. And I know that Ruby played a big part in that. So I think there are many things that happen that you only notice that they're not happening when no one does them. And I feel like those roles are so crucial. And I just really appreciated and appreciate Ruby for filling that and making things run smoothly. So.
Anyone else? All right, go ahead.
Excuse me. I'll just say, I'm in tears. It's a proud mama moment right now.
And you should be proud of your daughter, Miss Holmes. She's wonderful, and thank you for having her. All right. Before I get into a presentation, I did want to just remind folks that we are getting ready to start White Flag. An email did come out today to the full COC explaining that process. It will begin, and White Flag this year is going to just be called Cold Weather Shelter, as it's going to be stood up from November 1st through the end of March. And it will be open. There will be 10 rooms. That's what our capacity and budget allow. So it's a staff capacity issue. And those 10 rooms will be broken out, 6 for families, 4 rooms for singles, and we'll continue that through end of March 2024. And the prioritization process is on the email, and the referral form is in the email that was sent out today. And Open Table Ministry will be working on that. The piece that is different this year about it being a cold weather shelter is it's really going to be 10 rooms of extension of shelter. So it will be more intensive case management and expectations that people in those rooms will be working on permanent housing plans. And the expectation is, should they get a room at an emergency shelter, they will be expected to transfer to an emergency shelter to free that room up. Rooms will be given on a week-to-week basis, assuming the rooms are kept in clean order and rules are being followed, and that are working on their housing goals. If people are disappearing and not showing up or not meeting with people, they may be asked to vacate the room to bring somebody else in, especially if they're not using the room or having lots of their friends over at the rooms, because we really can't afford to pay damages in hotels when people have parties. So just wanted to remind folks for that. Thank you for that little announcement. The piece I wanted to share today is something that we've talked about in the past, and it's really focusing on the language around affordable housing. As you know, we've got a lot of affordable housing in the pipeline with Forever Home Durham. There's tax credit properties, there are low-income housing, there's public housing, there's all this, words that are out there. We've got 30% units, 60% units, fair market rent, area median income. So I've tried to put together a presentation today to try and help us as a group make sure that we, as the advisory committee on homelessness in the city of Durham and county, are all on the same page to understand what it is that we're doing and what the language means and how affordable housing impacts people experiencing homelessness, and also share some potential challenges that may be coming down the road that we'll need to be aware of and maybe help advocate or find solutions to these. So with that, let me see if I can share my screen here. Through this. All right. So you all can see my screen. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to start with just I know a lot of you know all these definitions, but for those who don't, we do talk with a lot of acronyms. So I want to make sure that everyone understands our acronyms that we're using today, which is AMI, which is the area and median income. HUD defines this annually for every geographic region or metro statistical area, metro region in the country. Durham's is part of the Durham-Chapel Hill region. So Chapel Hill's income gets merged with the Durham income and gets us our area median income for us. HCVs, what used to be called Section 8, have now become housing choice vouchers. And these HCVs are vouchers that are given to a tenant for a tenant to take anywhere in the geographic region to find a landlord to accept. That voucher covers up to 70% of their gross rent, and the tenant pays 30% of their income towards the rent. And that voucher can go anywhere, and based on DHA rules, after a certain period of time in the Durham region, that voucher could be ported into anywhere in the country. So if you're in the area for a while, you're here long enough, you can take that and take your voucher to, Kalamazoo, Texas. You could go wherever you wanted with that voucher. Fair market rent is our next one, which is FMR. That is our gross rent. And that's published annually by HUD for a geographic region. Once again, it's the Durham-Chapel Hill region. And that gross rent is the rent that is paid to the landlord plus a utility allowance. That utility allowance is calculated by adding up a ton of different numbers that are established by the local housing authority. In our case, it's the Durham Housing Authority. They have a tool that they create and put in place every year that goes through housing size and all the various utilities and the types of fuel used for those utilities. So electric, gas, propane, oil for heat, things like that. And you go through and add those up. So when you add all of your utilities plus what the lease amount is, that unit must be equal to or less than the fair market rent for most of our programs. The last one is a PBV, which is a project-based voucher. And a project-based voucher is a rental subsidy that is tied to a specific building. It cannot be ported. That building, that project-based voucher is awarded by the Durham Housing Authority to a specific building and subsidizes a specific unit in that specific building. So just wanted to make sure we kind of orient towards what all this means as we get through this. They do become a little bit important. Questions on the terms? Eliza, I'm going to trust you. I can't see all the hands, or if there are hands.
I don't see any hands and
Okay,
I don't
perfect. I'll
see
keep
any
going.
questions in the chat.
Okay. So we're going to start with, what is Durham's area median income? Well, the area median income is currently $116,200 a year. And to put this in perspective, based on the new allocations for people who are getting supplemental security income, which are people who are elderly or disabled or very, very low income and meet Social Security, supplemental security income, their income is $11,316 a year starting in 2024. It's a little under $10,000 this year. So big difference between the area median income and some of our lowest households who have income. There are people who have no income in our homeless system, but this is the, often hardest to serve, hardest to house, because they've got some income, but it's so low. When we're looking at area median income, it's important for us to remember area median income changes by household size. So you'll see in the chart what we have as HUD determines very low at 50% area median income, extremely low 30%, and low at 80% area median income. And you can see those numbers change by household size. Most of the people in our homeless system are at or below, are lucky to be at the 30% AMI. Very few people in the homeless system are at the 50% AMI. So we're talking about trying to find housing for people who are making $11,000 to maybe $30,000 a year. A lot of people are not making up in that 50% AMI. And the only way to do that is with vouchers. The fair market rents. And you say, well, why is fair market rent important? Fair market rent is important because, as I said, it's our gross rent. It's our benchmark that establishes what we can use housing choice vouchers to pay for, what we can use our emergency solutions grant rapid rehousing money to pay for, and what we can use our COC, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing money to pay for. You'll see the 2023 FMR at the bottom line and the 2024 FMR, fair market rent. The 2024 numbers began October 1st of this year. And as you look across here, it's almost a 25% jump from last year. And you say, well, 25%, that's good, right? It means we can rent more, there's more affordable units that we can go put money into. And the answer is, well, it's a mixed blessing. Because yes, there are now more units that fall into this rental category. However, HUD doesn't put substantially more money into our buckets to lease up these units. Our dollar amounts don't jump by 25% when FMRs jump 25%. So we do have a little bit more rent money, but keep in mind, while the rents went up, people's incomes did not jump 25%. And if people's income did jump 25%, great. But we're looking at when people's income don't keep up with that 25%, the subsidy from us gets deeper and means we may have fewer vouchers and fewer households that we can help because each household is requiring a deeper subsidy and needing that for possibly a longer period of time. The other piece with the fair market rent is, as you remember last year, we were talking about we couldn't find affordable units at $13.15 for a two-bedroom unit. Well, now we can find, probably a few more two-bedroom units for $16.31 or less when you back out your utility allowance that's in the $1,400 category. Challenge is with rapid rehousing, people couldn't afford $1,000 a month. They're not going to be able to afford $1,400 a month after that short-term rental subsidy ends. So we have a challenge of trying to figure out how do we close that gap and not have people slipping through the cracks if they need a full 2 years of rental assistance. So this is why fair market rent, and as it jumps, adds an extra layer of complexity to our system, and how do we juggle the use of these various programs to ensure we're using our limited resources wisely. Here, oops. Okay. As you know, we've talked a lot about, and you may have heard a lot of affordable housing developers. We've got 60% units, 30% units. And I want to make sure that we are very clear on what does this translate into in terms of us. We've talked about the fair market rents and affordable housing when we're talking about 60% units and 30% units. We're going to start with the 60% units. 60% units are the units that are set aside for households at or below 60% of the area median income. And for reference, a household of one, this equals $42,480 a year. A household of three equals $54,600 a year. The rent limits are set by HUD when home funds are put into the project. And if housing tax credits are used, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency sets the rent standards on what the rent limits are for the 60% AMI units. And these rent units for affordable housing are set based on a high limit and a low limit. And the Housing Finance Agency and HUD's home limits are not always exactly the same. The tax credit properties tend to maybe go a little bit higher in the amount. So we're only focusing on home today, just for conceptualization of what this translates to on a day-to-day basis. The high home limit is essentially 30% of somebody making 60% income. So if you're making a $42,480 a year, which is $3,540 a year, your high and low limit are approximately in the neighborhood of, averages out to about 30% of that monthly income. And on a 2-bedroom, it averages out to about 30% of that monthly income. The challenge is those units are available for anybody below 60% AMI. So if you come into that unit and you're making 40% of the area median income, you still have to pay $1,134 or $948, which is going to be more than 30% of your adjusted income, or of your income. And some households won't be able to afford that and afford groceries and gas or transportation or clothes, and need a subsidy to close that gap. So that's the 60% units. Now we talk about the 30% units. 30% units, those high home and low home rent numbers, they stay the same, even though the units are set aside for households at or below 30% of the area median income. So if I'm a single adult using 30% AMI, $1,771 a month, and I'm going into a high home rent at $1,134 a month, that leaves me $600 a month for food and doctors and clothes and all the other things that go with living. So to make it affordable, you have to have a voucher to make a 30% unit available for people who are below 30% AMI. A 2-bedroom, if you've got 3 people in the household, you might be able to make that work. It's still more than 30% of your income, but it does leave you almost $900 a month to try to live on. It doesn't make it easy, but at least you have a little bit more than $600 a month. These are all gross income, so you back out your taxes and it's probably closer to almost your entire paycheck. a person who, as we shared a minute ago, the household of one on SSI making a little over $900 a month isn't going to be able to afford any of these units without a subsidy. So without housing choice vouchers or other subsidies coming in to help cover that gap between their income and this rent, it's not a sustainable housing option for many of the people in the housing in our homeless system. As I shared, these 30 and 60% units create challenges. The rents are set at the specific points and they don't adjust. So just because you're in a 30% unit does not mean that if you're at 30%, you're going to pay 30% of your income. You'll only pay 30% of your income if you have a voucher that's going to cover the gap. And if we've got a household, just more of an example here, the household making less than 30%, so household of one at $21,250 or a household of three at $27,350 is still expected to pay $948 a month or $1,134 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. And the only way that's really going to be affordable to be able to live after taxes and stuff is with a housing choice voucher or a project-based voucher. And as a reminder, if you have $943 a month, like many of our elderly and disabled in the homeless system have, units are only available and only affordable with that voucher. So just wanted to kind of walk through all these developments and things and what they translate to sort of help make sure we all understand what 30% are and what 60% are, and how the housing choice vouchers are so critical to making these work. It's also really important for us to remember that HUD allocates vouchers to Durham, and those vouchers are allocated on, like, here's a number of vouchers, but those number of vouchers doesn't mean that you can go rent, you know, let's say HUD gives you 10,000 vouchers. That voucher has those vouchers have a maximum dollar amount. So if you go rent all 5-bedroom units, you're not going to get 10,000 vouchers out of it because your 5-bedroom units are way more expensive than efficiencies. So HUD figures out this should get you about 10,000 based on averages. But the more you have to subsidize, the fewer vouchers you actually have at your disposal. And as we work through this, the more vouchers we use, HUD's DHA is able to apply for additional vouchers and try and bring more in. In the event we don't have vouchers, then we have to figure out what do we do to help folks cover these housing costs as we navigate an ever increasingly expensive housing market in Durham. So I hope that sort of helps frame where we are today. Now, questions? I see Sharita's got her hand up.
Does anybody want to ask any questions before I start asking questions? Oh, I see Tracy's hand now. So I'll just start with my first question. So in essence, what that means right now, potentially, if by the time the units that we've asked for some concessions for people at 30% AMI, if we do not have vouchers available through DHA, or we as a system have not figured out ways to supplement people's incomes with some money from wherever that comes from, if there is the possibility, is there the possibility that even the units that were intended to be 30% AMI will be taken up by people who have a higher AMI? You get my question?
Well, a 30% unit is always going to be limited to a household that they cannot exceed 30% of the AMI. They must be below 30%. If I understand you correctly, somebody coming in without a voucher, if there's no voucher available and the person's making $10,000 a year, they don't make enough money to pay the rent on a monthly basis.
Right.
So they wouldn't qualify to move in without a voucher. So to your question, yes, it would go to the person who qualifies, but that person who qualifies would still be at or below that, or right around that 30% AMI, assuming neither one of the participants had a voucher. Does that answer your question, Sharita?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, it answers
Well,
my question, but I'm thinking about our most vulnerable people.
Mhm.
Most of our most vulnerable people have not been high wage earners. The likelihood that their income is going to be right now 914, or in 2024 the 943. We are not, if we don't have vouchers, those people will pretty much be knocked out of the competition for those units if we do not have the means to supplement their income.
More or less, yes. It'll be
Okay.
much more difficult to get them into a 30% unit because there's nothing to subsidize it without that voucher or without that project-based voucher.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. That was a really good presentation and overview, because I know we have new staff, I have new staff on, and so it's good to have an overview of what affordable housing means, and it's all relative to location, as we all know, because what's affordable in North Carolina could very well be very different for California, New York, Texas, and Florida.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I think I've learned over the course of my career is that, one, we have a lot of seniors and people who are on fixed income, people who are living on SSI or SSDI, who've been living in the same place for quite some time, and it was affordable maybe in 2010, but now it is no longer affordable. It was not intended or subsidized with any type of tax credits, but now their cost burden, because their rent is kind of very similar to the inflation everyone's experiencing on the fair housing market. And so we have people who initially they could afford their rent, but now it could be 200 to 500 to even more than what they initially signed on for. And so I wonder, as a community, as a COC, if we're also looking at the types of LIHTC properties that may be coming soon to expire, as well as what the market looks like. Because we do have people primarily that move here from other markets, and oftentimes the Public Housing Authority doesn't always absorb their or accept their voucher. It is, I think, an agreement between the market they're coming from to the market they're entering. So to assume, oh, well, I have a housing choice voucher and it's portable, really is not always the case, because sometimes they can move to another market, but it has to be a consensual agreement between both PHAs in
Mhm.
order for that actual voucher to be accepted into the market. And so I think oftentimes when people move here, they move with having that in mind, but it sometimes it doesn't work out, and they end up, signing on to a lease that really they cannot sustain over time. And I think that's a part of the longer discussion as a part of the COC, as we continue to talk about the affordability of housing, and also those different tiers, whether it's 30% and below, 60% and below, and whatever else is in between that, because we realize a lot of times that's where subsidies kind of kick in. But I think that just means we just continue to have to talk about that and how we infuse other forms of, dollars, either federal or local, to kind of help offset that cost, because sometimes we put people on the fringe.
Mhm.
They're not in a crisis right now, but their rent goes up $200 and they could be facing homelessness.
Mhm.
So it's just the dilemma we're faced with in this market.
You're absolutely right, Tracy. I think you hit the nail on the head on several points there with porting of vouchers. It isn't just you get to just pick up and go wherever you want and assume your voucher works. There is a lot of back end stuff, and I'm not an expert on how all that back end porting works, but there are agreements that have to happen. Jason from DHA is here, and if we really want to get into it, I'm sure he could help us understand it a little bit more. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, there's a contractual agreement of moving a voucher and absorbing the cost and how to make all the money work. The other piece, I think you really raised a good point, is the increasing rents, and not just the increasing rents, but people who have been in units for a long period of time where the rents had been low and the property owner had accepted vouchers. Then the property owner gets an out-of-town investor who says, hey, I want to buy this apartment building. The out-of-town investor acquires said building and says, hey, instead of charging $800 a month, I'm going to go through and renovate the apartment, put granite in and put in a new coat of paint and luxury vinyl flooring, and I'm going to charge $2,200 a month for these units. And I can, and I'll do it on a natural attrition. And in my new units, I'm not accepting vouchers. So a place that may have had 50 or 100 vouchers being accepted, now that group is displaced and trying to find new landlords that will accept vouchers. The good news on that is all of the projects that the city is putting money into, the requirement is they will accept vouchers. And tax credit properties are generally always willing to accept vouchers because they need them to cash flow because of those 30% and 60% thresholds that they have as part of their agreement to get the credits. Is it perfect? No. Is it going to be a challenge? Yes. And are we seeing more and more older people in the homeless system? Yeah, we've got about 30% of our homeless population is getting older, and it's going to get older. And we're going to see more and more people on fixed incomes needing deeper subsidies to be able to remain in housing, or finding more creative housing solutions where you've got shared housing and other things where people who've lived alone forever are not necessarily going to want to go and find a roommate. If they're, not married, obviously, if you're married, it's a different roommate situation than, being 70 years old and living by yourself for 45 years. And now all of a sudden I'm 75 years old, I got to live with somebody that I may or may not know. It's a huge culture shift and a huge, huge thing to think through. Go ahead, Russ. Or sorry, Tracy, did I answer or help clarify anything?
Yes, you did. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation and the questions. I come back to, very clearly we're going to need high functionality around HCVs, and probably other subsidy options are something we're going to have to look at, especially as we look to future bonds and future investments from the city and the county. I guess one very practical question is, what opportunities or accountability do we have when we're working with the Housing Authority's HCV office? Because I do know with our work with landlords, our experience as a landlord is that we hear from more landlords who are not concerned about the client situation. They are concerned about having the functionality of the Housing Choice Voucher Office, how long it takes to get things set up, things get transferred. I know that members of their staff have even mentioned that they've been understaffed by at least 55% for more than 2 years. But I'm at this point into creative options for how we find ways to support them, because it's literally costing us landlords when it's taking 4 or 5 months to get things set up correctly or transferred, and people can't cash flow. Properties can't cash flow while they're waiting for rent to come in for 4 or 5 months. And I do distinguish. Let me make this statement very quick because I don't want to be in trouble. I can distinguish between that which is a federal regulation that is outside of the Housing Authority's control. That's the whole thing that I do not know how they have the patience for some of what they have to work through. It's amazing. But how do we support improved functionality there, especially when it's causing challenges for us when we're trying to house people and find landlords who otherwise would work with us?
I am going to defer to Jason on this. He is the DHA rep and may be able to shed some light on current thinking. Jason?
Hello, everyone. I was a bit late. I was in a hearing, so I joined a bit late, and I actually need to sign the sign-in sheets. But let me just say that we have been short-staffed for a very long time, and unfortunately, we've had another dip the past several months. Colin, we had at least one individual who was very productive and had a lot of experience about a year and a half ago, and some other individuals. But we've experienced some more attrition, so we're at one of those dips again. And what I really want to say, or what might be productive, and first of all, Russ and some others, maybe sometime we could all get together and put our heads together. And I can hear from you all directly and share some thoughts. But where I'm going with this is one of the nuances that I've come to learn in my time here at DHA and in the voucher world is one of the realities is it's very, very hard to find people nationally who have enough background and expertise on the vouchering process who can immediately start working and contributing in that really complicated environment. In other words, within an HCV department. And so on one hand, there's the attrition phenomenon. On the other hand, as far as all positions to fill, HCV ones are very, very challenging. We have a very difficult time finding people who are qualified, really is as simple as I can put it, and can contribute right off the bat. And in the past, when we have brought people in without that much background, there will be a time of them ramping up, but there have been times when they've left. So I just wanted to mention that reality because I know that a lot of us here, that we've been short-staffed for a long period of time, but that is one of the realities that people might not know. It would be like a highly, highly technical field that really it's got a small pool of people, even nationally, that are candidates to fill it. And then you also, as everybody on the call knows, the high cost of housing in Durham is a challenge for hiring at the Housing Authority in general, because there are times when we'll even extend offers and people say, well, okay, let me look at how expensive it's going to be to live near the DHA office or in Durham. So in any event, those are some dynamics that folks might not know who are not inside of DHA. But I would love to meet with a group and maybe we can brainstorm, because oftentimes discourse, creates ideas that people don't think of. But I do want to kind of provide that gloss on why we seem to be chronically short-staffed.
Thanks, Jason. And yeah, I can take the lead on, or you and I can talk and set up a way to sort of get interested parties around a table to try and see what can we do as a continuum, and what can we do as partners to try and support, because we all need each other.
Oh yeah.
And none of us want any embarrassment or having people having negative outcomes due to staffing solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we all want advanced housing here. We want to expand the pool, and maybe we can creatively think of things that haven't been thought of before. So I'd be very interested in that.
Cool. All right, I'll get with you and we'll get a focus group put together. Could we, at least while Jason and I are putting that together, anybody who's interested in sitting in on meeting or roundtables, please drop your name and email in the chat, and we can just keep a logbook of it. So when we get when I can get with Jason and sort of figure out a time frame, we can sort of pull together the interested parties and put this together. Thank you all. Eliza, your hand's up. You can call on yourself. But...
I had one quick question. Just going back to the conversation about seniors, I'm very worried about our seniors. And, I think also for those who are on fixed incomes in homes that will be assessed with property taxes in the coming 2 years, just curious about, in my mind, this is trending a certain way, and curious about what data we're collecting that we may be able to understand and elevate those conversations. So I didn't know if you or others had recommendations of how we could kind of follow that better and understand, what's happening now and what may happen, and how do we think about that as a way to have more conversations broadly in Durham about solutions.
Data that's being collected is typically the data that we're collecting in our homeless management information system.
Yeah.
People reaching out for services, and we can run reports that give us ideas of how many people in different age brackets are calling. A little bit more nuanced, but we could probably even cross-reference that with numbers of people who are elderly and disabled or reporting disabilities at coordinated entry. So we can look at some of those pieces. It's hard from our vantage point to know the universe of all people in Durham who might be in a precariously housed situation, as unless they're reaching out for assistance or officially getting tagged in our system, we can't count them. So we can sort of say this is a rough estimate for a particular point in time. And we could kind of run the report for, a current time period and maybe the past 2 years and look for some trends that might give us an idea of projecting. If you see a trend of it went from 100 people in 2020 and now it's 300 people in 2023, well, you would assume in 2024 it's going to be 400 people, or whatever the math works out, 330 people. You're
Okay.
adding things together.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is important to look at, and especially with those who are medically fragile and becoming homeless for the first time, as they're losing affordable rental units, and shelter may not be an appropriate place, and hospitals aren't necessarily appropriate. They're not necessarily sick enough to be in an assisted living facility. So you've got that group of people who sort of falls through the proverbial cracks as well, that we have to solve for. Sharita.
So this has been on my radar for a little while. It actually came up as one of our topics in our policy and planning meeting on last month, after some things that I was just kind of seeing around the community that I was concerned about with our seniors and medically, and who are also medically compromised in our community. And so when we initially looked at the numbers, the trend wasn't like growing that big. But what I will say is I just came from Nashville in the beginning of October. The National Alliance to End Homelessness, this is on the radar nationally because our baby boomers are getting older and we're seeing a lot of displacement of seniors across the country. So there are toolkits that are coming out. There's data, there's research on a national level. It's all out, coming out every single day now. It's like I saw it, I mentioned it, I went to Nashville, they brought it up, and then I came back and then I've just been inundated with getting data on the trends and the concerns. So I think this is something that we really do need to take a hard look at. The last point I want to make, and I think this came up with some work that around the what was that big thing we just had to do that Lloyd was kind of leading us through? And it asked some questions about how we partner with other entities in the community around housing. So I guess it was like the senior complex, senior housing communities and things like that. And so what we were recognizing is that we don't have a good working relationship with those systems either, to just kind of get a idea of what the challenges that they're having, and how that might impact us. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, but I just wanted to bring his attention that yes, as a medical provider providing services to people who are homeless in Durham, I am seeing more seniors. I am seeing more people. Also, my people who have never been housed are aging up because they're in that baby boom category. And so we're going to be challenged. There are going to be some challenges. There are going to be a lot of things that this population of people can't do, systems they can't navigate just because they don't have the capacity or ability to do so. They're far removed from the world of work. They are not computer savvy, things like that, that we have to take into consideration. So we're going to have to figure out as providers and as a continuum how we then shift to be able to serve them adequately, because what we don't want our shelter to become is our next non-assisted living facility, and people can't move out because of those challenges.
Thanks, Charita. That was really helpful context. And I will be contacting you about some of this national level stuff that you're saying you got your hands on, because I'd love to learn more. Thanks, Colin, for the presentation. I got a message earlier from Lloyd. Lloyd, are you able to give us an update on funding recommendations for the city RFPs?
Good afternoon. Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up briefly on Jonathan's report about performance management. In terms of the funding recommendations for City of Durham funding, we, from that RFP, Families Moving Forward is recommended for $80,000 to support case management in their emergency shelter program. Urban Ministries is being recommended for $120,000 of CDBG funds also for case management in their emergency shelter program. CDBG is community development block grant funds that come through the City of Durham. Project Access is being recommended for $78,600 for rapid rehousing project, combination of Emergency Solutions Grant and City of Durham dedicated housing funds going into that grant. Housing for New Hope is being recommended for 2 contracts. One would be $100,000 of CDBG funds to support case management for people in their permanent supportive housing project. And then their rapid rehousing project is being recommended for $290,271. Also a combination of ESG and dedicated housing funds. Those amounts that I quoted are annual amounts. We are working to develop contracts in the department with these organizations, 3-year contracts with those amounts being available to them annually. The contracts would start hopefully January 1, 2024 and extend through December 31st, 2026. Thank you. And we appreciate the work of the scoring committee that helped us evaluate the proposals we received.
Thanks, Lloyd, for that update. I'm not seeing any hands or questions in the chat. So we'll move on to our next item, which is a continuation of our HSAC stipend conversation for an in-person orientation. We'll need some HSAC approval for this, and Melissa will be presenting.
Thank you, Eliza. Hello, everyone. So I've created a poll in Zoom that we're going to use to share availability. Essentially, the HSAC Executive Committee will be creating an agenda for this, for some sort of in-person retreat or orientation. And it is at this in-person meeting where we'll give out the books that we purchased with the stipend from last year. And then the executive committee will work on an agenda for the remaining time. There was some discussion about whether we should have a full day event on one of our HSAC meeting dates in February or March, or just a standard 4-hour time period to do some kind of retreat or orientation. And because we're not sure where everyone falls availability wise, the executive committee didn't want to make a final decision on an agenda for what that retreat would look like. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. So everyone, if you could take the next 5 minutes or so to fill out this poll. Please, only HSAC members. So if you are a member of the HSAC, fill out this poll. I appreciate everyone else for being here, but we want to make sure that we're not getting confused with others' availability as well. But please fill out your availability on each of the days. I think I gave 6 different options. They're all Wednesdays, but only 2 of the 6 options fall on HSAC meeting days. So if you can just share your availability, and then at the end of this poll, we will take some time to review which date seemed to work the best for everyone. And that is the date that we will vote on at the end of this time. Okay. I feel like I need some Jeopardy music to play. It's so quiet. Is everyone seeing the poll? I just want to make sure no one's having any issues.
Hi, Melissa, this is Vega. I did see the poll, but then it went away.
I see the poll. It could be that it's hiding behind other windows that you have open. That happened to me.
Yes,
For it.
Anthony just let me know he had the same issue. If you would like to, at the bottom, you see some widgets. If you'll click on the poll widget, it should open back up for you.
Found it. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna give another like 60 seconds for folks to submit their surveys, and then we'll go ahead and close out the poll. Don't forget to submit after you've selected all of your choices. All right, everyone, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll, so make sure you press that submit button if you have not. 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay. Let's see. Okay. For some reason, I don't think you guys are seeing the results, but I see them in my browser, so I'm just gonna share my screen. Let's go here. All right.
We can see them.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm seeing so far. All right, so what I'm seeing is that either a full day meeting on February 28th works for everyone that submitted the poll. And the second best option is March 27th. However, I think we might as well, Eliza, you can please tell me if you see differently, but I'm thinking that since we have 19 out of 19 who agreed that the 28th, a full day would be best, I would recommend that we work on approving a vote to meet on February 28th in person for an orientation / retreat for our HSAC.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like if 19 folks, I know it's a little tricky to know who those 19 are right in the poll.
Right, I would
because
be able to
they're
pull
members.
the specific names after the meeting when the poll finalizes, but for now, I'm just seeing the raw data.
Yeah. So I think it would make sense to go ahead and vote and to be able to move it forward. And if we look at the raw data afterwards and we need to come back to it for one reason or another, we can do that. So does anyone else have thoughts they'd like to share before I put a motion on the floor? All right. So there's a motion on the floor to have a full day meeting on February 28th that will help us have some sort of orientation and retreat with details to come, but that way we can hold it on our calendar.
So this is Vega.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we have our full day retreat on February 28th, 2024. For our retreat and orientation.
Thank you, Vega. Do we have a second?
Second, this is Renee.
Thank you, Renee, for that second. All in favor, please indicate yes in the chat. Against, indicate no, or abstain as needed. Great. All right. It looks like we will have a full day meeting on February 28th, 2024. And we'll look at that raw data on the back end, but sounds like, Melissa, we could probably go ahead and change that calendar invite so that we can have that blocked. That will certainly help me as I often forget about these things if it's not in my calendar. Thank you, everyone. Next, we're going back to Melissa for an informational only item of future policy updates.
Thank you again. All right, so if you have attended any of our policy and planning meetings recently, or if you are on the COC email list, you've probably received emails about some coordinated entry policy updates and grievance policy updates that are currently being worked on and drafted not only by our CVB staff, but also members of our lead work group, and 2 of our policy and planning members are also helping with those revisions and edits. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this to the full HSAC is because I believe we've had discussions about HSAC membership wanting to be informed ahead of time, if there are policy reviews or approvals that need to be made. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping everyone in the loop so that you know of any future obligations to approve policies for our meetings. So the next policy updates to be approved at HSAC will be in the November meeting. So on November the 15th is our next HSAC meeting. It'll be the third Wednesday, I believe, of November. So we'll be a little bit early just so that we can free up your schedules around Thanksgiving. And at that meeting, we will be approving revisions to the coordinated entry policies and our grievance policies. Anthony Henderson on Team CDD is overseeing those changes to the grievance policy. The last grievance policy updates were in 2019, I believe. And as far as I know we have not been, following that policy as easily because the Ombudsman Committee has been disbanded in some ways. And there are some other aspects of the policy that are a little bit out of date. So our team is working on updating that. And the same can be said for our coordinated entry policy. There are some updates that need to be made just so that we can make sure that our policies reflect what we're actually doing. So we are just making sure that all of those updates are happening, and we're making sure that we're including the feedback from our folks with lived experience, and of course our policy and planning committee's guidance as well as we review a lot of those changes. So I just want to make everyone aware that those final updates will be sent to the full HSAC on November 13th. That's when you can expect an email with a draft of the revised policies. And on the November 15th meeting date, which will be 2 days later, is when you'll be asked to approve those policy updates. I do want to allow some time for questions just in case anyone has any, or if there's any clarification needed for anything.
All right, not seeing any hands or any questions in the chat. Thanks so much again, Melissa, for that update. Moving on to our final item of our agenda, our announcements. So wanted to open up space for anybody who had an announcement they'd like to share. Welcome to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Yes, Helen.
Hi, we still have a lot of, not COVID, sorry, flu vaccines available for our unsheltered or anyone who's uninsured or underinsured. And I did hear, we've worked with Urban Ministries and Open Table, but if anyone else has people who still need flu vaccines, let me know, because we want to use up the ones that Public Health has set aside so that they can continue providing these each year. Yeah, so just let me know. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, Tracy.
Yeah, just wanted to announce we have a new staff person on board, Cerinthia Winningham. She's going to be working with our DASH program, which is our permanent supportive housing program. So if Miss Cerinthia could come off camera and say hello. Just started last week.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you guys. A lot of information to take in, but I'm definitely looking forward to working with all of you. It's a lot of information, but I'm more than willing to take on the task. Ms. Tracy has been great with introducing everybody to me, and I'm getting acclimated with my space. And I look forward to meeting you guys, hopefully in person. If not, I drop my email in the chat if you guys, and I'll do it again, just in case you guys need to reach out to me for anything. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Russ.
Just a note for your calendars to save the date. Pit count planning is underway. That will be the evening of January 24th, 2024. So the groups are starting to get organized for that, but wanted to make sure everyone has that date on their calendar. We had great turnout last year, more than we really needed at moments. So we're kind of thinking through that a little differently this year. It had great media coverage, which really helped to highlight to the broader community some of the challenges our most vulnerable neighbors are facing. And we're already starting on some of that work too. We invited WRAL just yesterday. So please do get that on your calendar and make sure you're able to be with us, hopefully that evening. More to come.
Thanks so much, Russ. Abena.
Greetings, everyone. Wanted to announce and share that all 4 programs of HEART are now citywide and running 7 days a week. You can still contact us if you have a neighbor that's in need by calling 911.
Very excited. Thanks, Abena. Lloyd.
Thank you. Since we're sharing future attractions, as it were, let me remind people of the annual Homeless Memorial Day memorial service we typically have on the longest night of the year, December 21st, the winter solstice. We expect and hope that Durham Congregations in Action will again be the host for that. For this last several years, we've had it at 6 p.m. at the Pavilion in Durham Central Park. We will be communicating more information, but hopefully members of the HSAC and the COC will want to come and remember people who died homeless or recently homeless in our community in the past year. And I have 9 people on my list so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd. Shaisha.
Hello. As many of you know, Alex Protzman has been the executive director of Life Skills Foundation for almost 10 years. And as part of his succession planning, I have taken over as the interim executive director until January, at which point I'll become just executive director. So no real change there, but his last day with the organization will be the end of the year. And at this point, he is currently executive director emeritus. He's kind of out to pasture, but I have kind of taken over and excited to continue to work with you all.
Congratulations, and thanks for sharing that with the group. Lots of good announcements today. Giving people one more minute as I'm doing that. Just a couple of reminders from the end of the year agenda. Our next HSAC meeting is not on the 4th Wednesday, so just keep that in mind. It is the 3rd Wednesday, November 15th. There are invitations to join Policy and Planning or Performance Management Committee, and we do have a county appointed HSAC seat available, so you can find those reminders at the end of your agenda. Right, just checking the chat, making sure we don't have any more questions or announcements. All right, well, we are ready to adjourn, so I'll open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
I move, Sharita.
I second Angela.
Sharita first made the motion, and Angela Holmes seconded the motion, and we can adjourn. So thank you so much for your time today, and hope you have a great rest of your October and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.